What's the craziest reason you had to fire someone? Story 1, we had someone fall asleep at his desk with a lit cigarette in his hand. In an office full of cubicles like maybe 6 to 7 years ago, smoking wasn't legal anywhere indoors, let alone in an office building LMAO. And the first time he wasn't even fired, he was fired when it happened again. Story 2, once I had a guy call in sick to his restaurant bar shift right before his shift, and then proceeded to show up face drunk for happy hour during the time he was supposed to be working. He was not a bright man. Edit, dear Lord, I posted this before bed thinking nothing of it, and woke up to like 15K upvotes. Here we are at nearly 21K. Restaurant life, man. So many can relate. To clarify, with this guy, it was not an isolated incident. Mental health days are totally legit. Just don't come to work for happy hour faced. Restaurant life be wild on so many levels. Story 3, stole a 100 bill out of the register at the end of his first shift alone on register. Years ago, at a lumber company, had a guy, less than 2 hours after he started on his first day, pick up his car with a forklift and stand underneath it to see what was rattling when he drove. Story 4, not me, but my dad. He has a small handyman company with less than a handful of employees. His tools somehow have the habit of growing legs when he's at construction sites, so he rigorously writes his name on everything with permanent marker. One day, shortly after he hired someone new, his folding ruler is missing. He asks around if anyone has seen his folding ruler, but that doesn't seem to be the case. He doesn't think much of it. Sometimes things get lost. The next day, he sees the new hire with a familiar-looking folding ruler. He asks him to see it. New hire refuses. Dad tells him that he's his boss and insists he shows him the ruler. He complies under pressure. Sure enough, there's my dad's name on it in capital and bold letters. Now that could have been an honest mistake, and there probably wouldn't have been any repercussions if he simply said, "Oh, my bad. Must put the wrong one in my pocket. Hey, race your ruler." But the new hire insisted that this was his ruler, and that the name on the side of it wasn't my dad's handwriting, but rather a note the new hire had written on it himself to remember my dad's name. What makes it even more stupid is that my dad's company pays for the tools of his employees. He could have simply asked for a folding ruler, and my dad would have given him one for free, but no. He needs to steal the boss's folding ruler and give the stupidest lie imaginable as an excuse. Edit, I really hoped I wouldn't have to deal with your dad fires people for taking 3 tools comment, but as it came up and is far down the comment chain, I'm going to put it here in case somebody else also feels the need to address this. 1. If you're working in handcraft, you probably already know about the special importance of your tools. 2. It's also very much about trust. An employee of my dad will be unsupervised in strangers' homes at points. Showing such a disregard for other people's property doesn't pair too well with that. My dad is very trusting of his employees and former employees. He frequently lends tools and cars to his employees for their private projects like moving. He has also helped plenty of former employees to start their own business, and when they do so, he'll let them still come by and lend use the special machinery he's collected over the years to which new businesses usually don't have an access to. So, if you're still not convinced that this isn't a show of power, kindly not too crazy, more stupid than crazy, one of the programmers on my team was sitting at his desk looking at, and this is cubicle land, no offices. My director walked into the area to talk to me and saw it. Then it was the first thing he told me about, so I got up and walked over for a look myself, and there it was. Me and the director looked at each, and I said, I got to take care of this. So we walked back to HR. I told them what was going on and what we saw, and they told me to fire him. So I did. I lost a 110K job for looking at on his computer at work. Story 5, had to fire a guy for coming to work high on meth and getting lost in a closet while painting it. Asked what the deal was and was told I'm having a conversation. That was his last day. LMAO. Story 6, I work in an art studio where we teach classes and sell pottery that our artists make for others to paint. And one of the artists and the manager, I started getting a funny feeling about one of my employees. She wasn't doing anything blatantly wrong, just seemed to work really slowly sometimes, request insignificant, but kind of odd schedule changes, and have different break habits from the other staff. I started feeling like she was stealing, but this is a really small business, so I didn't have her on camera or any way to really prove it. Until she accidentally sent me a video of herself painting pieces that I made from her home. Story 7, I worked at a retail store and found one of my coworkers was using the company iPad that we use to play music and order lunches to go on Craigslist and search for hookups. She didn't even bother to delete the search history. Story 8, I worked at a pet store and was the lead cashier. So I had to train this girl who didn't think she had to abide by the uniform because it's just store name and doesn't count as a real job. That was a warning that despite her thinking she did need to follow the uniform rules. Then when ringing up customers, she actually told customers they couldn't buy certain items because we were running low and she planned on getting a pet soon. And one of these items, I apologized and rung them up, second warning with me explaining how that's not how it works, and she could shop when she's off the clock. Finally, my manager fired her when she tried to steal one of the cats that were up for adoption after being told she needed to wait for approval after they do a home visit and make sure she can care for the cat. Her excuse for trying to steal the cat: her landlord doesn't allow pets, so she wouldn't be approved, and she'd be a much better pet parent than anyone else who wanted the cat, and much better than any of the customers we got. The girl didn't even last a week. Story 9 fired a guy for looking to pay someone to cast black magic on the owner and the owner's family to bewitch them into giving him a raise, and, ironically, never firing him. Only reason I found out was because he asked someone else in the office for help in finding a witch doctor to cast the spells, and word got round. No one wanted to be in the same room as him after that. When I confronted him, he said the devil made him do it. So it wasn't his fault. I live in the Middle East. I definitely did not wake up expecting to fire someone for black magic that day. Side note, practicing black magic is literally a death sentence here. Story 10, a guy trimmed off his pubes and left them scattered across a shared desk in a shared office. When confronted, he pulled a George Costanza. Oh, is that frowned upon? Story 11, I was a bartender bar manager. This guy came in one night and said he was an aspiring DJ and asked if we would consider hiring him to come in just on Sunday nights to DJ for us. He said we wouldn't have to pay him at first. He would just take tips, and we could renegotiate after he helped to build up our Sunday night crowd. He lasted less than 3 months. He drove away so much business, and I got so many complaints. He played the same songs every week, and when people made requests for commonly known songs, he had no idea who the musicians were. I had to fire someone who was working for free. He was a nice guy, which is the only reason he lasted as long as he did. Story 12, my coworker at a coffee shop. 1, told a customer she didn't feel like making X drink and she should go elsewhere. 2, wore Cookie Monster PJ pants while we had a very strict black or khaki pants. No jeans, no leggings policy at the time. 3, couldn't figure out the concept of milk. This still baffles me to this day. Like I was trying to show her how to steam milk properly. She was off in La La Land, and when she snapped back into the conversation asking, "What are we doing again?" followed by me reminding her, and she quite literally asked what was in the gallon jug that I poured into the metal pitcher. I told her it was milk, and she just looked at me, her eyes saying she was there for 2 days. Edit, sorry, I was off Reddit for a solid 3 days. Thank you for the silver kind human. Also, trying to reply to everyone I could clarify anything. Definitely didn't expect this to get any traction. Edit 2 location was a certain green and white cup establishment in Oklahoma. Lots of drugs are around the area. Not Tiger King area, though. She may have been stoned out of her mind. There's no telling with the area. The school systems have really failed the less than genius population. Story 13, I am a chef at an upscale restaurant. The sock cook has a lobster dish on a station that involved a technique called deglazing that involves alcohol. So in turn, the pan catches on fire briefly and flames up. When you do it correctly hard to do it incorrect, the alcohol is cooked off and the flame goes out. Every time he made this dish, he would deglaze the pan, catch it on fire, and then blow it out, blowing his own germs and nastiness all over someone's food and everything in the blast radius. That was a week ago. Fired him after he did it multiple times after being asked not to. Maybe it's because of the current state of affairs, but I couldn't believe a trained cook would do that. Story 14, not my personal experience, but one fellow contractor had a safety guy for 6 months. One weekend, he took a trip out of town for non-work related reasons, but used the company truck and charged it all on the company credit card. On his way up there, he ran a random person off the road, who just so happened to be one of the owners of another contractor who works closely with the one who employed this guy. Shortly after he was fired, and I'm sure criminal charges were being brought against him. A couple weeks later, his wife calls his former employer, saying he had called her randomly and killed himself in his truck on the side of the highway. Me and another colleague went searching for records of this guy. Couldn't find anything, no claims of a suicide in the local paper where he supposedly killed himself at. Thought it was weird, but whatever, it turns out this guy falsified all his qualifications and job experience. Fast forward a month later, and I heard through the grapevine that the original contractor who had employed this guy received a call from some contractor across country because he applied for work there and put them down as his previous employer. He faked his own death to get out of trouble with the company, then proceeded to put them down on his resume, not expecting anyone to check his references, LOL. Story 15, the guy had somehow hung on by the skin of his teeth when caught making plastic model funny cars at his desk. Pro tip, throwing a newspaper over the model doesn't hide the smell of the glue. But when a client called complaining about our hero, trying to sell him golf clubs out of the trunk of his car, he was gone. Story 16, harassment. He harassed virtually every person in the department on racial and religious grounds. Human resources put up a fight while I had people crying and quitting because of him. Story 17, I work construction, and one of the subs gave me an invoice with no receipts. Turns out he wanted $30K for 4 weeks of work without paying the companies he rented equipment dumpsters from. I paid off the companies he owed money to and told him to off. Story 18, in the early 2000s, I managed a coffee shop that required the customers' names to be put on the cup. One guy looked like he was doing it, but upon closer inspection on some cups, he was writing an IP address. Turns out he was running an illegal sports book out of the shop. He did quit before I had to technically fire him because he found out I knew. Story 19-1, he said, my ex-wife died, and there's no one to take care of our kids. Needed a week off to sort everything out. Ex called to talk to him. Boom. 2. One of the guys went to lunch with short hair and came back with a ponytail down to his identical twins that were sharing the job. All the guys knew and thought it was funny. Yikes. Story 20, plumber, my helper, and I went to do a punch list at a new home. When the very attractive 20-something-year-old answered the door, I asked what the problem was, and she said, when I take a shower, the shower head makes a whistling noise. My helper said, hell, if I saw you naked, I'd whistle too. She complained to the super. I had no choice but to fire him. Story 21, my assistant manager announced to a female coworker that he had officially named both of her, after working with her for 3 years. This was the second time he had said something to her within a week and had to be let go. He was a 47-year-old virgin who still lived with his ailing parents. I didn't know who to be sorry for the most. Story 22 had a food and beverage manager that brought a coffee into his female assistant manager on inventory day when the two of them would be alone performing inventory. She drank about half the coffee, started feeling dizzy, and saw there was a heavy table pushed up against the door. She freaked out and got out of the area. She went to HR, and they tested the coffee, and it was roofied. Definitely the most interesting firing I was involved in. Story 23, when I was working at Burger King, our restaurant manager was away on maternity leave, so we had someone from another store come in over that time to fill the role. He ended up hiring someone who had worked there 5 to 6 years, previously high turnover. So a lot of hiring leaving. The few staff that had known her before she had left hated her, but had no idea why she left. She even passed all the checks from head office before she was hired. Restaurant manager comes back about a month after she's been hired, takes one look at her, and rages like my RM is yelling at this girl. She's yelling at the manager that hired her and all the crew that had known her when she was here last. Obviously, none of us knew what was going on, but it turns out this girl hadn't left. She had been fired, and management at the time hadn't told anyone that. Just that she had quit. This girl had scammed BK by pretending to be pregnant, fake ultrasounds, plans, baby shower, the whole lot, and then took paid maternity leave so she could go work somewhere else because it was seasonal work with better pay, with the idea of having a job for the off-season to come back to. I have no idea how she got through the head office checks, but she was fired that day. Super impressive when you consider that I'm in New Zealand. So getting fired is usually a month-long process here. Story 24 might not be the craziest, but when I was working in fast food Subway, I had to fire a guy for assaulting a customer. He had a bad temper. He threw the tuna scoop at a particularly difficult Karen. I had to request the customer to not press charges. Story 25, I used to work at a hotel near an airport. So pretty much guaranteed business 247365. The housekeeping supervisor was a straight-up sadist, putting a pregnant housekeeper in the smoking section on purpose, refusing to resupply, and even stealing from one housekeeper for having the audacity to ask for a schedule change, berating, laughing at another employee battling obvious mental health issues, etc. She even let her adult stepdaughter move into rooms listed as vacant without paying for them. For what reason, nobody knows. What finally got her evil fired, a former employee making a social media post describing all of this the day she got canned. Everybody celebrated. One of the housekeepers even started singing. Story 26, he worked at the company for 2 weeks, came to the Christmas party on Friday, got faced, told the HR manager that she was A and would die alone. They had some previous vaguely romantic history. Went on a couple of dates or something, tried to fight 2 of the customer service managers who asked him to calm down. And while being escorted out, he turned to the CEO and COO and told them to go themselves. He showed up at work on the Monday talking about how fun the party was and how he had seen some people who would probably be called into HR that morning. He was the first and only employee to be called and was sacked on the spot. Story 27 had an employee that was going to get fired for simply showing up late constantly with no legit reason. During the term meeting, she tells me another employee cut the brake lines in her car. It's obvious this was to save her from being fired. She didn't realize that something like that gets cops involved. She was termed, and then detectives showed up to her house to get statements. Of course, no evidence of lines being cut. and now she's dealing with police for making false statements. Story 28. A guy was hired at the metal fab shop I was working at. He had been laid off when we were slow. He was rehired on a Friday. Started Monday. Goes and does his drug test first thing. He failed. Apparently, he had celebrated being rehired over the weekend. It was funny listening to my boss say, "Are you kidding me? You knew our testing policy? You couldn't wait 3 days." Story 29. I had to fire a pizza delivery driver because he threatened another driver with a giant rocker knife we used to cut pizzas. His reason was the other driver was gay and he didn't like his decadent lifestyle. Story 30. She didn't show up for her first shift, then tried to blame us for it, then refused to turn in her uniform and key. First shift. What the lady? Okay, first solo shift. She showed up for the 2 training shifts before that, but still I can't believe it. Story 31. I didn't do the firing, but a company I worked for was growing rapidly and needed people quickly, so they weren't too picky in who they hired. They hired this one guy, Rick, who was kind of strange, seemed harmless enough, but he was just kind of weird and socially awkward. He started off okay, but after a couple of months, his work started trailing off. His supervisor spoke to him to find out why, thinking maybe something at home was going on or there was some other issue. Rick said all was okay and left it at that. However, there was no change in his work. Long story short, the land guy started looking into his computer usage and found that he was trying to log into sites at work all day long and being repeatedly thwarted by the firewall. Then he started doing searches on how to get around the firewall, then tried getting around the firewall, and then tried logging into the sites again. He did all of this on his work-issued computer on the company's network on company time. Yes, after that all came to light, he was quickly shown the door for misuse of company property. Looking back, I kind of feel sorry for him. I'm guessing he was either just that stupid or battling some kind of addiction if he couldn't abstain for 40 hours per week. Story 32. A guy told a female coworker he wanted to take her newborn baby home with him to inspire his wife to have one. Dude was creepy as before that, but the complaint she made to management was what got him cut loose. He denied ever having said it, despite corroborating statements from other employees and a couple customers. Story 33. Posted this story before. Gonna post it again. TLDR, I worked at a gas station with a guy who stole 15 grand from the safe in front of a security camera. The manager gave him the opportunity to return the money without bringing in the police, and he refused. Shenanigans ensued. Quick background: back in the far-off year of 2005, I started working at a gas station and was promoted to a low-end management position fairly quickly despite being a slacker at this point in my life. That job was easily the most dramatic place I have ever worked. I wrote about some of this in another AskReddit post regarding a girl I worked with, but that only scratched the surface of the I had to deal with incompetent supervisors, sadistic regional managers, stoner drama, bizarre robbery attempts. You name it, I swear I could write a book about my time there. In the 3 years I worked at this weird place, the one individual I will never ever forget was a man I shall name Fuckwort. I'm giving him a made-up name because I don't want his antics to be associated with a real name. Fuckwort is one of the worst humans I've ever met. He possessed a level of dedication to the arts I never knew existed. It's easy to get on the terrible human list by doing something incredibly taboo. Murdering a defenseless old lady, for example, is a fairly quick and efficient way to be branded scum of the earth, and while Fuckwort never did something so reprehensible, he strives to that level. Fuckwort was a man in his mid-40s and was a failure in every way. To begin, he was ugly as, when I say ugly, I don't mean his nose is too long or his eyes are too far apart. I've seen plenty of people that don't fit modern Western beautiful standards and still manage to turn heads. Benedict Cumberbatch's forehead looks like it's trying to escape his hairline, yet he could have walked through Australia and solved their brush fire problem with all the soaked panties he'd leave in his wake. No, Fuckwort had the faintest glimpses of a man who could be somewhat attractive if Head put a little effort into his appearance, but instead felt that a beer belly and pasty skin is a small price to pay for a regular diet of booze, fast food, and cigarettes. He's poor groomed, slouches, and has awful teeth. It's a small miracle he's showered regularly. Fuckwort's appearance is only a small reason he was a failure. Fuckwort was a conniving, backstabbing, two-faced, racist. During that awful year I knew him, he was always trying to get ahead by pushing other people back. Fuckwort used to run a car dealership with his brother. He somehow managed to pressure his brother into selling his part of the business, then proceeded to run it into the ground with the stark efficiency of German engineering from a parallel universe. He absolutely hated black people, like I didn't know people like him existed in this day and age. I remember one day we saw a black man and white woman walk towards a store holding hands, and he went off about how it boiled his blood that those people are stealing our women and that races should never mix and that black guys don't know how to treat a lady. I should mention that Fuckwort's wife kicked him out of the house for cheating. Oh, and his wife was Asian. Not long after starting Fuckwort, had his eyes on moving up into management, particularly my position, and somehow got in his head that if you got the current manager fired, you would get their job. For nearly a year, he worked his off to get me to lose my job. I wish I was kidding, I really do. Below is a list of some of the things he did to try to get me canned. Fuckwort would never do work, and then blame it on me. Even if I wasn't working that day, Fuckwort would convince other people not to do work, and then blame it on me. Specifically my poor management skills, since I clearly couldn't control the people who worked under me. Fuckwort took multiple 45-minute-long cigarette breaks. For reference, in my state, you're allowed 2 15-minute breaks every 8 hours. He said that he was just taking them both at the same time, and that I shouldn't give him for going over a few minutes. He also took his 15-minute breaks on top of this. Fuckwort timed my breaks to the second. One day, I walked back from my 15-minute break about 30 seconds late, and I was greeted by Fuckwort holding the phone with a very confused supervisor on the line. Fuckwort was two-faced to an extreme level. Even when he told me not to give him, he would say it in a jovial manner, haha. Don't worry about it, it's just a few minutes, but when I wasn't around, he talked about me like I was literally Hitler that can't get off or fat, why should I care? He always acted friendly to me, but would revert into in the literal second my back was turned. I could see his reflection in the mirror, giving me rude gestures whenever I would turn to stack boxes. This was a regular occurrence. At one point, his best friend and the other low-level manager didn't show up for his shift and didn't call in. At this job, we had a strict one-strike-you're-out policy on no-call, no-shows. This best friend of his was there for him every step of the way. He took in Fuckwort when his wife kicked him out. He drove Fuckwort around after he got his license suspended, and pretty sure had donated a kidney to Fuckwort once his body gave out from all the booze, fast food, and cigarettes. He was that kind of guy. What did Fuckwort do? He strutted around the gas station saying things like "new manager walking" for several hours while we all waited to find out what happened to his friend. His friend eventually showed up and explained that his car died and his phone ran out of batteries. Fuckwort went on and acted like nothing happened. During this time, I would put on my happy face and do my best to deal with him. I was much younger and filled with wide-eyed idealism and believed you could find good in anyone and that forced sterilization is a universally bad thing. This went on for what felt like an eternity until that fateful day. Quick bit about my supervisor. Sups is a great guy. He tries to be friend with everyone and runs a pretty good shift. His biggest flaw is that he's a bit absent-minded, something that his team helps pick up for. Nothing major. Maybe once or twice a week, they'll have a file inventory for him. One day, his absent-mindedness nearly cost him his job. You see, Sups left the safe open. This apparently happened once or twice before, but whoever found it was kind enough to close the safe and call him up to let him know. Sups would then get gently chided for his negligence, and he would pay for his crime by buying the finder a drink, and all would be good. This time, Fuckwort discovered the open safe. Ever the entrepreneurial spirit, Fuckwort easily recognized this great opportunity and took it upon himself to liberate the bountiful stash of free money. All would be clear for Fuckwort to spend his ill-gotten gains on hookers and blow, if not for his careful planning, not taking into account the security camera staring down at him like a voyeuristic god of common sense. When a supervisor came an hour later, right as Fuckwort was leaving and soon discovered the missing money. Without hesitation, he checked the security feed, and I saw Sups get angry, like really angry, thousand suns billowing flames of hate as they sing out in burning rage, all contained in the effigy of a scrawny, normally pleasant little man. I was a little turned on, but I digress. He picked up the phone and smashed in the number for Fuckwort's phone. "Listen, you son of a," he said in a tone I would not describe as conversational. "I know you did it. I know you stole the money. Get back here right now with the cash. They'll fire you. But I won't call the police." Even though the phone wasn't on speaker, I could hear the weaselly voice of Fuckwort making excuses. "No, man, I didn't take it," Fuckwort squealed. "I don't know what you're talking about." My supervisor was about to reply, but Fuckwort hung up. Naturally, Sups called the police and corporate. Fuckwort went on the lam for about 17 hours before being apprehended by the police to this day. I always imagine him getting chased down in a field by a pack of K9s and their officers wielding billy clubs, and he was hauled off to jail and was predictably fired. I don't know what happened to him afterwards, but I believe he got a felony. I normally try to remain a compassionate person, but the thought that his life being ruined brought me quite a lot of joy at the time. The Great Caper occurred around Christmas, and I had opted not to accept any gifts that year because I felt like I had received the greatest gift of all. I know this makes me a terrible person, but honestly, after dealing with Fuckwort for as long as I did, I just don't care. The supervisor somehow didn't get fired. I know, he should have, but I guess in all the confusion, corporate forgot, and I feel like this is okay. So that's it. That's the story of Fuckwort, the worst human I've ever met. Edit, thank you all so much for the gold, but please donate to a charity instead. The world is in a rough place right now and could use your support. Story 34. One guy regularly called and saying that he was hungover due to company drinks. However, I was the one paying for those drinks, and he had at most 2 pints of beer prior to leaving any of these events. Another person called our CISO Kim Jong-un when said CISO was asking about scans and patching, and this was after multiple formal warnings of similar. Yet another person decided they were going to repatch everything in the comms room without notice, not test their work, and not be in the office the following morning. My favorite was the genius who decided they were taking that server out of production in 6 weeks, translated to them being allowed to turn the box in question off, remove it from the data center, put it in the back of their car, sell it to their friend, and then hand over copies of software we had written so said friend could run a horoscope and phone service. As a wonderful colleague of mine has said, where do we find these people? Story 35. It wasn't me that fired him, but my dad. My parents own a CAF and had just hired a new employee on his first training shift. My mom had introduced herself as the boss, although my dad owns the business. My mom is just as much one of the bosses. My mom is British, and my dad is Spanish. My dad was working the back kitchen. He was main chef, and my mom was teaching the guy the table numbers and introducing staff. When she explained that some of the kitchen staff hadn't got really strong English skills, the bloke went off on one, saying, "Well, I'm glad you're finally giving the British a chance. Foreigners that come to Britain need to speak English, or they should be deported immediately." My dad steps and explains that he moved to this country without knowing a word of English and built his business up from nothing and now speaks 5 languages, much more than this British guy that could only speak English. My dad explains everyone should be given a chance, but that this British guy had blown his to work at my dad's established. He fired him on the spot and banned him from coming back. He was replaced by an Italian lady that my dad speaks to on occasion in Italian just to brush up his language skills. For reference, he speaks, in order of learning, Galician, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and English. He's been living in England for 46 years now. Story 36. Had to fire my own brother from our distribution company. Really was not easy and definitely caused family fights. He had been using our product so much so that we lost half our stock. To be fair, he got over it in about half an hour. We were 7 and 5 selling candy to fundraise. Story 37. I was a florist and had a 40-something woman delivering for me. I received a call from the building manager of a brand new office building, with only one tenant, telling me my driver rode on the elevator wall with a Sharpie. They had video showing that she was the only person to use the elevator during the time the vandalism took place. The worst part for me was this happened a few days before Valentine's Day. Story 38. The saddest was a lady that smelled like alcohol pretty frequently. I don't think she was drunk on the job, maybe some shots down at lunch combined with sweating out the prior night. But the other members of the team started to complain about it, and it was becoming disruptive. Story 39. Around 20056. Worked in a supermarket. An extremely irate, and in this case, fully understandably, customer returned a 5-liter tub of ice cream, she that had a face imprinted in it. Unfortunately, the perpetrator had extremely unique features, a large nose and chin, and yep, it looked exactly like our staff member. He had cracked the lid of an ice cream tub, imprinted his face in it, and then somehow managed to get the lid back on tight enough for no one to notice, and somebody purchased it. Not gonna lie, I did giggle at the sheer audacity of it, but still had to fire him. He denied it. It's literally your face in the ice cream, man. To this day, I still think about it, and am just a tiny bit disappointed when I open an ice cream tub and it doesn't have a face imprinted in it. I hope the customer didn't get any mild PTSD and can open ice cream tubs with confidence nowadays. Story 40. When I was a bank teller, a fellow teller got fired for stuffing her purse with a strap of 100s every day, 10,000. Hey, race, the interesting part. She always put the strap back in her teller drawer at the end of the day. She did this for months and months, apparently, without anyone noticing. But when the camera auditors finally did catch it, she was confronted and fired. When they asked her why she put a strap of money in her purse each day, but always put it back, she said that if the bank were ever robbed, then she could just take the money home because everybody would have assumed it was taken by the robber. Story 41. Okay, this is my cousin's story. He worked as an electrician. He and a coworker were running some data cables in an office. An attractive young female office worker got up from her chair and left the room while coworker was working in her office. When she returned, she found the electrician intently sniffing the seat of her chair. She complained and the guy got canned. Story 42. Once had to fire someone from a testing job because they were live streaming the unannounced game with their phone right in the lab in front of everyone. After signing their NDAs, more than fired really, they are for life. Story 43. I didn't fire them, but someone got fired for have a BAC0, 33, at work. She had stolen boxed wine from the grocery store where she was a pharmacist, hid the wine in the bathroom trash can, took many bathroom trips, and was caught on a fluke because a higher-up came to wish a tech good luck on their last day of work. Her keys were taken away. Somehow she took her pants off and was prancing around the waiting room in her underwear, and with pants on escaped to a nearby Starbucks when asset protection came by to scoop her up to be fired. Saddest part was that she turned out to be pregnant during this and was facing a divorce. Something finally cracked, I guess.